All right, kindergarten, here's what you missed. This week we continued painting. So last week we had started and we talked about how to keep our brush clean. We swish it in the water by gently stirring it, drag it, and then we had already put a little drop of water in each of our paint to get it going. We call it watercolor because there's a bubble of water on top of each of our paint. So we put that first, swish, drag, swirl it in our paint, and then we come in and we paint it. And we use just the tip of our brush and we pretended like our brush was a ballet shoe slipper, and we just use the tip nice and gently, and you can see my white crayon is shining through. That is called a wax resist. Now this week we talked about two different painting techniques. One is called wet on wet, and that is where we paint, and we painted two colors that are wet right next to each other and they blend together. So we have wet paint, I have blue here, and if I paint another color on top of that, it will blend together. So if I paint green in here, it will blend together, and I will end up with a really pretty color that you can see it's already feathering together where that line is blurred because the two paint colors are wet. And if we keep mixing them, they will blend together into like a teal color. So I have blended those. That is called wet on wet. Now I'm going to clean my brush. When we are painting, we always have clean water, our paintbrush, and a paper towel or napkin. That is to clean up any messes. Swish, drag, make sure our brush is clean every time we put it in our paint because we never want to have dirty paint. Now we'll come in and get a new color. We'll come in to start painting the other spots. Swish, drag, swirl. Come in and paint those other spots. Swish, drag. I should have paint the fire kind of yellowy too. And then I'm going to put a swish, drag, swirl. Put a little orange in my wet on wet to make it look fiery. Ooh, it's like magic. Swish, drag, swirl. Purple and my S with my crown. We talked about how the crown was something that Jean-Michel Basquiat put in all of his artwork. It was like a signature for him. And I'll paint my leaves. Now we also talked this week about how if you didn't have watercolors, what could you do? So we learned this really cool technique. If you have Crayola markers, you can go ahead and draw on your paper. Just gonna draw a little bit, and it can be messy, it's okay. And then you can go over that with a wet, clean paintbrush. So I'm cleaning my brush, swish, drag, and I'm just gonna go over it with a little bit of wet water. And you can see it turns that watercolor into, or it turns that marker into watercolor. So if you don't have paint, this is a great way to make it look like you do. You need a little bit more water. The more water you have, the more that marker flows on the page. Flow is a word that we use to talk about the way something moves on the page. And I'm going to go right around these leaves with my water. And I'm still just using the tip of my brush to pull up that paint and make it flow around. Now this is a really cool trick. And you can see how the farther I get from that marker, the lighter it gets. So this is really, really fun. Okay. Now, when our paint is dry, we can do our other painting technique, and that is called wet on dry. So when our paint is wet on wet, we notice that we get really soft edges. When our paint is wet on dry paint, so this is totally dry paint, I can swish, dry, swirl, And we can go ahead and put another color on top, and we get nice crisp edges. So if I come in and paint, see how it doesn't blend at all. So that is called wet on dry. Wet paint on dry paint. And we still get to save our wax resist. That stays the same. All right, my friends. I hope that you have fun experimenting with wet on wet painting, wet on dry painting, and maybe using some Crayola markers to pretend that it's watercolor. All right, have fun.